beginning of October, I went to Korea for a joint session between New York State Bar Association and Seoul Bar Association, where we were discussing about new technology. What we did is we held a panel where we discussed regulation of artificial intelligence from many jurisdictions along with international organizations. So we discovered the EU AI Act, the OECD principles, the UNESCO draft guidelines and guidelines, all international organizations work, along with select jurisdictions such as the United States of America, England, Korea, China, the EU side, and Turkey, obviously. And afterwards, I went along to the General Congress of the Union Internationale des Avocats. The topic was the application of new technologies in museums. So what are their challenges? What are some obstacles, or what are some of the chances our museums are keeping up with the new technologies, and what are the legal questions that they have to take into consideration? So I had the opportunity to raise the question whether new technologies like augmented reality or virtual reality can be used while finding a solution for cultural property restitution questions. Back in 2019, I had the opportunity to work stellar art lawyers back in London with Pierre Valentin, Tilwer Hodge, and Azmina Jazani, among many others. And I have been discovering these questions of cultural property restitutions for a very long time because, I come from Turkey, and Turkey has many, many cultural objects, some of which we are, successful at retrieving back, but some we fail, unfortunately.
Just give me an idea or a vision that a restitution of cultural objects through AI, how would that work?
Well, I mean, this is obviously a very delicate subject with many, many details. But what I had in mind, for example, in Turkey, we have the Stargazer, which was recently in front of New York courts. The New York courts decided that Turkey can no longer pursue the Stargazer to have it back in Turkey because of doctrine of lashes, which is something in layman terms is we were too late to go after the Stargazer, that it's some kind of statute of limitations that we cannot take it back. So what I was having in mind, for the time being, we cannot have the Stargazer. It's going to be in New York for some time. But can we have the design of the Stargazer in augmented reality? So a Turkish child goes to a museum in the very location in Afyon, in their cities, Afyon or Manisa, and if they go to museums and they see the augmented reality restructuring of the Stargazer, it would not be the same cultural influence, of course, but it would at least give it an idea to the other people who go to the museums in Turkey, while providing a geographical and cultural context. So that was what I wanted to discover. I know that for some people, cultural property, for some cultures, they're super important because the object itself is the object of desire, basically. Sometimes they have spiritual or cultural connections that are very valuable. And I'm really happy to see the recent initiatives of many jurisdictions who are more welcoming than before to restitute these objects. But until we reach an agreement or until wanted solution is achieved, I think new technologies can open many ways for shaping these discussions.
Yes, and they can offer you different opportunities which we did not have before. And that is really an amazing thing. I mean, even ABBA came alive back in the musical, right through in London at least.
I'm a huge fan of Indiana Jones, and in the last film of Indiana Jones, we got to see the young version of Harrison Ford. So it was it was great for me.
Exactly. There are many opportunities and possibilities to live with augmented reality and to just
Yeah.
change things and adapt our reality. That's a great input. Absolutely. Let's get a bit back to NFTs. I mean, NFTs is a way of saving and protecting the intellectual property that is behind, no matter what it is. We're now focusing a bit on art. Would you have a legal definition after all these interactions that you had and all your research? Would you find a legal definition for an NFT?
I'd like to provide a definition to the NFTs, which goes like they are unique and secure ownership certificates which utilize smart contracts and are protected by blockchain technology. Of course, the questions relating to their definitions, especially whether they constitute a type of property, personal property, or do they constitute a financial instrument, a security, is the discussions are still ongoing. and I can only provide an insight from what I actually think. Whether they qualify as a property is a very interesting question because, NFTs are crypto assets in the end. And many courts, many academicians have been discussing whether, new crypto assets are properties as we know it. So probably coming from Switzerland, you and Turkish legislation is quite similar to Switzerland as well. Some jurisdictions, when they're qualifying something as personal property, they have one criterion, which is the physical materiality. That is something that you have to hold with your hands in order to qualify as property. So in Germany, in Switzerland, in Turkey to some extent, this is a very definitional problem because the crypto assets are something that we cannot touch or even see. They're just a bunch of things that we see in the digital realm. So that question, whether they qualify as a property, is a very interesting question. And I think I have been telling to many people about the UK task force's solution as to maybe create a third category of property where the physicality is not on the forefront, but nevertheless they qualify as a property. I wanted to raise this discussion because I think it's very important. In the first years relating to NFTs or crypto assets, the problem of definition is that if you cannot qualify NFTs or other crypto assets as property, or at least having proprietary nature, then it means that the object or the thing that you have in your hand is not going to be able to benefit from what is qualified or what is given to property under the existing legal framework. So we had a couple of cases in the United States, and they wanted to go against the theft crime, or they wanted to raise the situation as being theft. But if in your jurisdiction theft necessarily requires a property, it means that you cannot even sue them on basis of theft, but you have to go through another crime. You have to go and pick from another crime which those unregulated assets can benefit from. So this is a really important question, actually, the question of definition. The UK task force has, as I said, recommended that there should be a third class. There have been many academicians who thought that this is not necessary. We can fit in some of the existing classes of property. But I think, considering the new technologies and many different specialties of the new materials, I think it's not very unwise to discover those ways as well.
On the other hand side, I mean, if I think about property, we also had the same problem already with software in general. And for intellectual property, for example, there is a separate regulation regarding software, which is very specific, that might be used also, at least from the intellectual property perspective, on blockchain-based technology. What do you think about that in the context of property in itself? Do you think it could be covered, you personally, or do you really feel like the UK proposal, they should have a third version of property, a new definition?
That's a very good question, and I think it's not an easy question to answer. Of course, I can just give my personal thoughts. But I think the era that we're living in is not going to change for the upcoming years. So I think it's really important to go again on the principles and rules that we have so far. So I think I'm a little bit with the UK proposal for the time being, because I really think there's worth considering different avenues when we're talking about crypto assets or any other materials that they can come up, in the upcoming days. But I think we have to go through the rules very meticulously in the upcoming days, I would say.
And how do you think that the question whether NFTs are securities or not influences that decision as well? Or would you want to say some words on that field? I mean, that has been a huge issue, especially in the US, as far as I understand.
So while I was writing my thesis, I had gone through many decisions and discussions from the US jurisdiction, because the question whether they qualify as security or not is a very crucial question as well, because just as with the discussion of the property, there are some regulations that are typical to securities, and if the material in hand is not a security, you cannot use those rules on that said material. which is very important because securities law, of course, is very well regulated and the rules are super severe and naturally providing with many, many protections for that material. So in the United States, the test which is used for defining something as security is the Howey test. And the Howey test is actually, it basically have four criteria which discover as if one person buys something with the envisioning that it's going to be worth something else. So there's this criterion of having an investment aim, and which is purchased and sold after a couple of times. So you can see in the Howey test, I'm not an American lawyer, of course, but you can see in principle that when something is used as an investment material, that criterion is at the forefront for being defined as a security. So if NFTs are not securities, what else could they be? They could be, commodities, like something else that you buy and, if a couple of time passes, you can sell them afterwards. So the difference between securities and commodities is that specific investment aim, which is, probably taking place in a smaller window of time. So in that discussion, I was actually inclined to think that NFTs do not qualify as securities because I was tempted to think that people, collectioners, are buying them and, not with a very specific intent of, making them as an investment. Because I used to think that many people were interested in NFTs, are, taking this from a pure art point of view. So this is an important technological development influencing the art world. So people are collecting it. But I think this is somehow like blind commentary because, as you know, Anna, the art market is super vast and there are lots of actors. Some people are indeed after the artistic value, but some people are, just there for the pure investment values.
We're talking about art that is saved in NFTs, but we should not forget that we could save all sorts of things in NFTs. We could save like the rights to have a barrel of gold or oil, or we could have financial products saved. Coins are maybe also legally spoken some sort of NFT, more or less. There's no big difference at the end of the day. To a coin that you had it, and the question if it's a security or not, especially with the Howey test, probably will be much faster on the question: is there an investment aim at the beginning of the transaction and within the piece of NFT or art or whatever it is behind it? What do you think to that?
Well, as lawyers, whenever we're, providing some consultations in the first times, we always say, well, we have to look at the concrete case. And, this is like a joke between colleagues because some other people who are like engineers or artists or, other business people, they're always saying like, you're always saying the same thing. You have to look at the concrete case. But it really is the case. So there have been several discussions in the United States academia and courts as well, as far as I'm concerned. It is not very easy to include NFTs, for example, from a regulation point of view in the securities legislation by citing that NFTs are a part of this regulations as well. Because as you said, NFTs have many, many use cases in which some of them are not used as investments. So if you put the NFTs as a general category, it's going to be not reflecting the the current situation either. So I think my answer is going to be a little bit boring, but same. We have to look case by case what NFT is used for what and what the purchaser are buying with what intent.
Very true, very true. Here the running gag is "Es kommt darauf an" in German, which means it depends. It's even
Yes,
worse.
exactly. It depends.
But it truly does. And I mean, something that as a non-lawyer, also business partners need to understand, if you do not perceive properly any sort of situation or of setup, then you cannot really get to the grounds on a legal point of view. That's impossible.
Very
And
true.
for us to properly understand what an NFT is or was at the time when it came up, was an investment already to understand what is blockchain based, how does that work? Because all these details implement the qualification and all sorts of legal considerations that you would need to take to decide on a qualification and then on the outcome. I guess you agree to that.
I 100% agree.
You've probably seen more cases than anyone else in that field. Would you have one or two funny or interesting examples to share with the audience on cases where NFTs were involved and taken to court, or where there was a specific questions that was discussed?
I started writing the thesis in 2021. And at that time, everybody was, talking about NFTs all the time. And I think the Collins Dictionary has chosen NFTs as the word of the year because it was, the COVID boom. Everybody was at home and everybody was like Googling NFTs. So it was very popular. But I think, if you look from a legal evolutionary point of view, the first questions were always the ones which were involving copyright questions because everybody wanted to do, we're buying an NFT. Can we, show it somewhere else? How can we use it? What are the limits of our, showing it somewhere else? So I would say that the first questions involving, the NFTs were always coming from copyright. So you had the Tarantino case with Miramax, for example. Miramax and Tarantino had a sub-license agreement for the movie Pulp Fiction. And then Tarantino came up with, minting their own NFTs. And Miramax immediately sued because they were saying that, well, I mean, we have a really old license agreement between us. So now you cannot mint them without our, permission because basically the rights belong to us. So it didn't go well ahead in court because they settled afterwards. But I think that case was really, really important to rethink if you're especially in arts or entertainment areas, you have to update your licenses because sometimes you write your licenses when you are taking into consideration the existing legal rules and technological developments. We had a couple of similar things in Turkey with vinyls and CDs and cassettes and MP3s afterwards. Some music industry actors actually had some licensing with the singers or producers by saying that you can never make other vinyls. But then the technology just developed so much, and we had CDs, and afterwards MP3s, and currently everybody is like downloading stuff on Spotify. So that artist, in which the license agreement did not contain the new technology other than vinyls, they went ahead and they made a huge amount of money. So I think the Miramax versus Tarantino case was really important to always keep in mind that you have to make sure that your license agreements are up to date and covering any potential technological developments as well. What I wanted to actually explain is that the intellectual property questions actually came first because sometimes you needed an immediate action. Everybody wanted to take a part of the NFT train, and everybody was minting some NFTs without properly looking at their licenses or without discovering their rights. So the immediate questions which arise were with intellectual property questions because you really had to take an action if you just don't want the alleged infringements to continue occurring. But afterwards, the things got interesting. And we, started seeing cases which were involving, crypto frauds, theft, some other things where the courts actually had to take into consideration whether NFTs were a property or not.
Absolutely. I mean, the Birkin case was just, I remember that lively, how interesting it was to follow. And I think it has a huge impact also on the community. These cases were well known, Tarantino and Birkin, so well known that really the community started to create some sort sensitivity and to understand, okay, we cannot go beyond any measures and we cannot just expand our understanding and perception of rights in general just because this is not tangible.
Yes.
And that was a huge step already. But I wouldn't have wanted to be that judge because, inventing law on something completely new is really a terrific thing to do. It's also interesting to see for artists and collectors what we lawyer get inspired by and what really interests us in this field, and also get a bit of the sense of how with which glasses we look on things. And that's important also in this field, especially. And also to set up a bit of a reputation, a better reputation for NFTs and technologies in general. So, your personal perception on NFTs in the art world, what do you think? How did the art world change?
So when I first started, doing research on NFTs, I immediately thought from an artist point of view, it was finally the proper way for artists to have a more democratic and a more chanceable atmosphere for artists because if you're especially working with digital art, there's just a there's just a huge possibility that your work is getting stolen without even the artist being aware of it. So I thought immediately, I mean, if everything is secured on NFTs, this could be really helpful. And especially the NFTs, of course, it's one of the standards in Ethereum, which allowed NFTs to have, royalties and to follow these royalties, in the other hands that they belong to. So I thought, NFTs is finally a very great solution because you can follow wherever it goes, and in each sale you can, have royalties, which is great and which is not very, followable for classic artists, so to say. I thought they were great. And I also, these were my initial thoughts, and I still have those thoughts. The only problem for the time being is that we still have, and this is not a problem of the NFT world, I think this is the problem that we have as humanity. Everything sort of depends at the end of the day to our capacity of storage. So the more storage place that we have on the blockchain, the better on-chain NFTs that we can have. But for the time being, these are difficult. It's very, very difficult to store a hard and large NFT on chain on the blockchain. So for the time being, there were always some other solutions to that. But I think the technology is not going to be going anywhere. And I think it's very good for, because what NFTs actually suggest is it's so vast. There's actually no end to it. I mean, we have been passing all these years in the art history world and the art world about, proving that if something is original or what is provenance and, what if it's authentic. And NFTs have the capacity to, answer to all these questions. Of course, aside from, hackings and other cyber attacks, but, in principle, they have a great potential to answer some of the questions that are heavily asked and shaped the art world for at least, I would say, 2-3 centuries. So in that respect, I'm actually very still hopeful about NFTs, and I think they have a great potential. And I certainly believe that the technology is not going to go anywhere. It's going to be evolving, and it could be really, really good for the art community, both for artists and for the purchasers, of course.
Zainab, it's the two of us, the biggest enthusiasts on NFTs worldwide, probably. We truly believe.
It was the same thing with many, many technological developments. Many people were really, curious about the World Wide Web in the 90s as well. But, here we are. We cannot imagine a world without the internet right now. So things change and evolve.
That's very true. And I have a certain thesis on how AI and the perception of AI will maybe also influence the audience a bit in the sense of we lose fear because we start to use it all over and in any section of our life. And we get acquainted and we get a bit more used to having things that we did not have before. So maybe that will also help NFT technologies and the spread of art, the art in the within the art world for these technologies, hopefully.
Hopefully.